The 30th of January, 1933, Germany. Adolf Hitler, the leader of the Nazi Party, is appointed Chancellor of Germany and aims to lead the German master race to victory in the racial struggle against those deemed as inferior peoples, especially the Jews. In shaping and implementing many Nazi policies, the German medical profession plays a central role, and many doctors and nurses become involved in crimes of the regime. While some German physicians welcome the Nazi regime because it supports their beliefs about racial hygiene, others join to take advantage of opportunities to advance their careers. Among them are 200 German doctors who from 1942 begin to conduct painful and often deadly experiments on thousands of concentration camp prisoners without their permission. One such doctor is a fanatical Nazi and a world-renowned professor of anatomy. His name is August Hirt. August Hirt was born on the 28th of April, 1898 in Mannheim, then part of the German Empire. Hirt was still a high school student when the First World War began, on the 28th of July, 1914. Although he was the son of a Swiss businessman and held Swiss citizenship, he volunteered to fight on the German side. In October 1916, he was wounded in the upper jaw by a bullet and received the Iron Cross Second Class. By the time the First World War ended, on the 11th of November 1918, Hirt had been studying medicine at Heidelberg University. In 1921, he gained German citizenship, and the following year obtained his doctorate in medicine. He then worked at the Anatomical Institute in Heidelberg, and in 1930 became a professor at Heidelberg University. In September 1932, Hirt joined the Militant League for German Culture, a nationalistic and anti-Semitic political society that aimed to promote Nazi ideology by defining and enforcing a culturally pure German identity. On the 30th of January 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany by President Paul von Hindenburg. In April of the same year, Hirt became a member of the SS, and 4 years later in May 1937, he joined the Nazi Party. He got married, and the marriage produced a son and a daughter. The Second World War started on the 1st of September 1939 when Germany invaded Poland. By the time the war broke out, Hirt had been an SS medical chief. The German invasion of France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands started on the 10th of May 1940 and became known as the Battle of France. These countries, along with France, were conquered within 6 weeks, and Hirt participated in the battle. He then became the director of the new Institute of Anatomy at the Reich University of Strasbourg. August Hirt despised Jews and communists and aimed to create a collection of skulls from what he called Judeo-Bolsheviks for his racial research. He believed that the Jewish population was on the verge of extinction and wanted to compile a collection of their skulls while it was still possible. He proposed this project to Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS, stating that there were comprehensive collections of skulls from nearly all races and peoples, except for the Jews. He argued that the war in the East provided an opportunity to address this gap by obtaining the skulls of Jewish Bolsheviks, who according to him embodied the disgusting but characteristic subhuman. Hirt conceived a project that went beyond a collection of skulls, aiming to gather complete Jewish skeletons. He presented his research plan to Himmler, who approved the project, allowing Hirt to begin his so-called medical experiments. Working with his colleagues, Hirt selected individuals from among the Auschwitz inmates to create an anatomical specimen collection specifically of Jews. He proposed using a small-scale gas chamber to murder the selected individuals, keeping their corpses intact, and then having them shipped immediately to the Anatomy Institute in Strasbourg for the casts and skeletons he wanted for his collection. For this purpose, Hirt chose Natzweiler-Struthof concentration camp. Natzweiler-Struthof was the only concentration camp established by the Germans in the territory of pre-war France, located about 50 kilometers southwest of Strasbourg. Prisoners worked in nearby granite quarries, on construction projects, and in the maintenance of the camp. There were about 50 sub-camps in the Natzweiler-Struthof camp system, and by the fall of 1944, there were about 7,000 prisoners in the main camp and more than 20,000 in the sub-camps. About 52,000 prisoners were estimated to have been held there during its time of operation. It was a labor camp, a transit camp, and as the war went on, a place of execution. Many died from the exertions of their labor and malnutrition. There were an estimated 22,000 deaths. Hirt directed that 115 persons be selected for measurements: 79 Jewish men, 30 Jewish women, 2 Poles, and 4 Asians. They were selected from among the inmates in August 1943 and subsequently quarantined to protect them from a typhus epidemic in the camp. Of those initially selected, eventually 87 inmates were transported to Natzweiler-Struthof from Auschwitz, of which 46 of these individuals were originally from Thessaloniki in Greece. To improve their appearance for the body casts, they were fed reasonably well. One male victim was shot as he fought to keep from being gassed, and 86 prisoners, 57 men and 29 women, were divided into 4 groups, and then gassed on the 11th, 13th, 17th, and 19th of August 1943 in a gas chamber built under the command of Josef Kramer, at the time the commandant of Natzweiler-Struthof. Kramer himself directed this murder operation and watched the victims' death throes through a window. The inmates' bodies were returned to Hirt at the anatomical laboratory of the Reich University in Strasbourg for preparation as an anthropological display, including taking body casts and preparing the skeletons. However, the project of the so-called Jewish skeleton collection, the purpose of which was to prove the alleged racial inferiority of the so-called Jewish race, and to emphasize that Jews were subhumans and Germans were superhumans, was never completed. On the 6th of June 1944, under the code name Operation Overlord, US, British, and Canadian troops crossed the English Channel and began landing on the beaches of Normandy in France. This operation became known as D-Day and was the largest amphibious invasion in history, deploying more than 160,000 Allied troops on air, land, and sea. 50,000 vehicles, some 5,000 naval craft, and more than 11,500 aircraft supported the initial invasion. The Normandy landings, codenamed Operation Neptune, became one of the main turning points of World War II, and by the end of June, more than 850,000 troops had come ashore on the beaches of Normandy. In September 1944, the rapid approach of the Allies led to the project being abandoned, and Himmler ordered the destruction of all traces of this compromising collection. That order was not completed, nor had the casts been taken or the skeletons prepared. The bodies, some of which were beheaded, were preserved in formalin and hidden in the basement of the Anatomy Institute, where they were discovered. However, at Natzweiler-Struthof, Hirt also performed other experiments. In 1943, he exposed camp prisoners to mustard gas in order to test possible antidotes. Gerrit Hendrik Nales, a former Dutch inmate who worked as an orderly at the Natzweiler sickbay from November 1942, testified during the Nuremberg doctor's trial that between April and May 1943, a blistering substance had been smeared on the forearms of 15 German inmates, inflicting terrible, festering wounds on the skin that spread to the whole body and caused some inmates to go blind. According to Nales, 3 inmates died in horrible pain within a couple of days. During an Allied bombing raid on Strasbourg in September 1944, Hirt's wife and son were killed. After the liberation of Strasbourg by the US 7th Army in November 1944, August Hirt fled with his daughter to Tübingen in southern Germany, where he stayed until the occupation of Baden-Württemberg by the Allies. Following the liberation of Strasbourg, the French military tribunal began its investigation. After a period of unsuccessful attempts to identify the victims, however, the French military, which controlled Strasbourg, gave up and buried the bodies in a mass grave at the local Jewish cemetery. August Hirt was never tried for his crimes, but justice eventually caught up with him. He was 47 years old when he committed suicide on the 2nd of June 1945 at Schluchsee, Baden-Württemberg in the Black Forest. When he was tried in absentia for his crimes at the military war crimes trial in Metz on the 23rd of December 1953, his suicide was not known. In Switzerland, the search for Hirt continued until the late 1950s. His death was finally confirmed in the mid-1960s when the Israeli Secret Service, Mossad, had his body exhumed, and an Israeli pathologist conclusively identified the bones. The names of the victims remained unknown for decades after the end of the Second World War. In the 1990s, however, Dr. Hans-Joachim Lang, who studied the war crimes committed by August Hirt, attempted to determine the identities of the victims in the Jewish skeletal collection. He found archives at the Reich University of Strasbourg, located at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, including a handwritten copy of the numbers recorded by Hirt's assistant, Henri Pierre. At the Nuremberg doctor's trial in 1946, Henri Pierre, who had been Hirt's anatomy assistant, testified that he noted the numbers tattooed on the arms of the corpses that had been brought to the institute and kept a secret record of them hidden in the apartment of his romantic interest. Together with archives at Auschwitz concentration camp and Yad Vashem, Israel's official memorial to the victims of the Holocaust, Dr. Lang was able to identify all 86 of the victims' names and other identifying information, including their occupations and places of origin. In December 2005, a memorial was erected at the Jewish cemetery in Strasbourg with the names of the 86 victims. Moreover, a memorial plaque listing the names of the victims was placed outside the Anatomy Institute at Strasbourg's University Hospital. In 2015, additional remains of Hirt's victims were found at the Institute of Forensic Medicine at the University of Strasbourg. They were buried alongside the other victims in the Jewish cemetery in Strasbourg. There were no tears shed for August Hirt.
Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.